Hello, everyone. This is my communications interview project. Let's jump right into it. So, I interviewed Dr. Zoe Jones. She's the current chair of the art department, and she knows the ins and out of the art department. So, I'm an art major, and she is a great catalyst to get my name throughout the arts here at UAF as I'm going into the BFA or Bachelor of Fine Arts program. It's just a little bit more prestigious than the BA or Bachelor of Arts degree. And I knew she would be a great candidate for this interview because she communicates with people on the daily, a ton of different people from a ton of different walks of life. And so she is an art historian. She has a PhD in art history. She experiments with the literary aspects of communication as well as teaching through lectures and seminars, and she communicates in academia as well. So she had a bunch of different ways she communicates with a ton of different people inside UAF and outside UAF. So the questions that I wanted to focus on asking her, these are not all of the ones I asked, but the ones that I will be covering today. Um, One, do you think it's important for artists to communicate an idea visually so that others can understand the work even when the artist isn't present? Two, how has your style of group communication changed with age and specifically going from a student to a professor? And three, have you ever had difficulty communicating with somebody just because they are so culturally different from you? And finally, four, what is your process of taking and implementing constructive criticisms as an author and a publisher? So the red thread between all of these questions is really articulation and conflict management. I wanted to focus on this because it has huge implications for my future in my career as an artist and in my general life as well. And I wanted to look into um, Zoe's journey with developing her communication skills and seeing if I could apply what she has done to my life and implement it in an effective way. So the sources I included for this paper was the textbook, Interpersonal Communication, A Mindful Approach to Relationships, a honors reading, Common Misunderstandings, and finally some outside research, Blakemore and others, their Strengths and Soft Spots survey, and they explored how personality types can affect interpersonal communications, specifically in social work professions. And so that includes my career as an artist and possibly also a librarian. And so I didn't really quote directly anything in this presentation, but they provided some really useful insight, especially to me as an undergrad, because they focused on how younger generations feel more pressured and more demanded from others. And I really was able to relate to it with my challenges in communication. So this idea of expanding perspectives, Zoe brought up that she tries to make her students find diverse perspectives through literature. So specifically in her upper division seminar classes, she will assign students different readings from different perspectives, different authors about the same topic, and then they come together and have a healthy debate in class about it. And so she wanted to encourage this debate and healthily pushing the comfort zone. And she said that through literature, it allows you to think through things in a way that talking doesn't. And people are able to, take a break when their emotions get too high and then resume when they're ready to come back at it with that open mind. And even if you don't agree with an idea, absorb it, find out what you think about it, and then move on. And it gets into this idea from the textbook to take a pause and stop feeding the vulture. And the vulture is like these negative emotions. And it's just, you're trying to find something that will, make sure that you stay calm and cool and collected. And through literature, you're able to train this skill when it comes to it in person as well. And Zoe also mentioned that this idea from our final paper that not all conflicts can be resolved. Sometimes you just have to manage it and get through it and move on. And she noted this specific instance with a coworker that every time they communicated, it just felt like something went wrong in person. And so she shifted over to emailing. And she found that this different way to communicate actually was a lot more productive. They were able to clearly communicate what needed to happen and move on. And so she definitely pushed this idea to me that sometimes face to face isn't always the best way to communicate like people says it is. And so it was really refreshing to find a different perspective, because I feel like a ton of people are pushing face-to-face communication, especially post-COVID. And sometimes that's just not going to work for people. This also gets into this idea of articulation. And so as an artist, I was really curious to find her perspective as an art historian. Do you like it when art has ambiguous subject matter that we can't really put a name on? And she said that, as an art historian, a little bit of ambiguity can be fun. It's awesome to, get all these different perspectives on it. And even though nobody can agree, it's very interesting to, discuss your viewpoint. But she mentioned that in academia, ambiguity is not really the best idea. And so you have to go through and say, well, this is what my piece is about. This is what it means to me. And even if other people don't understand it, this is why I made it. And especially in the BFA program, you have something called a thesis defense. You fill up the gallery with your works, and then you go to this panel of judges and you explain why you made them and what they mean to you. They don't have to mean anything to anyone else, but you need to have a good idea and a defendable thesis for why you made this running thread of works and displayed them. It also gets into this idea of visual communication. So ambiguity can be misunderstood like any other form of communication. And that's from the Common Misunderstandings from Panfil. And visual communication is how I communicate as an artist. And it's very, very important to be aware, and this idea of language awareness from the textbook, or the ability to adapt your language with other people to communicate effectively. And so it's a very slippery slope in visual communication, and it can go into appropriation and make people very, very upset. And so developing these concise statements and defendable theses is crucial to, making sure that you can avoid this unnecessary conflict and properly communicate with anyone. And these misunderstandings are present everywhere in life. So it's not just something that can be in the arts. It's something that everyone needs to be aware of. And this quote from Zoe, "It was terrifying, but I did it," refers to when she was just taking her first teaching classes. And it was her and one other person in this entire seminar class. And so she grew up super shy, just like me. And she's like, I was so scared going into it, but I had to do it because this was my dream. My dream was to be, a teacher. And so it was terrifying, but I did it. I think that's a great, very relatable quote for me. And this last idea of implementing criticism. So Zoe runs into criticism a lot from her coworkers when new ideas are being pushed out by the chancellor, and from publishers and editors for her academic writing. And so what she said is defensiveness only makes criticism worse. You need to be humble and take a step back. Again, take a pause and take a deep breath and realize, maybe they have a point or maybe they don't. And she said that the best thing is to be humble, to train your humility. And, you have to explore this development of critical thinking. Do they have a point, or is this idea, did I explain it in the way that I needed to because it means something? And so you have to go through this process of, well, should I remove this? Should I change it? Or should I not? And should I keep it because it means something? And a good way to get used to critique and developing this critical thinking without, having that defensiveness factor get in the way is self-critique. And again, specifically through writing for her. And so it just allows you to really detach yourself from the art and, find, points that people might pick up on and critique. And it'll just make that defensiveness go away later on. And another pretty relatable quote she said is, "It's always a challenge to not be self-conscious and not question everything I say." And so again, this idea of training this skill, it's never really going to go away, but you can train how you respond to it. And so throughout this entire interview, I got a lot of great ideas on, Zoe's personal growth and also how I can apply that to my personal growth. And I also built a ton of rapport with her and the art department in general. And I was able to find these reachable goals that I can set for myself, especially through self-critique, because that is something that happens a ton in art. And I still do feel that defensiveness. And it's something that I and other artists struggle with a lot. And again, this has external implications. This isn't just going to apply to my career. This is going to apply to my entire life. And as you see, I included the last scores of the post-communication apprehension assessment. And so I went from a very high apprehension to a more moderate apprehension, which is great. And I really enjoyed learning through this class and through this project how to communicate more effectively. And so this final quote from Zoe, she said, communication is a constantly evolving process. You can always do better. And my interview with Zoe was just one step of mine in my constantly evolving process with interpersonal communication. Thank you guys so much.